A review code for this game was provided by Bandai Namco. About 3 years ago, we saw the release of Pac Man World Re-Pac, a remake of Pac-Man's first 3D adventure with a wide range of new features and graphical enhancements, and while I enjoyed that outing quite a bit, I'm sure I wasn't the only one who saw that game and immediately hoped that Pac Man World 2 would get the same treatment. Pac Man World 2 felt like the old yellow orb really finding his footing in the 3D space, and I've got lots of fond memories of playing this game on my cousin's Xbox, just vibing with the music, the worlds, the environments, and the promise of getting to revisit this game while also seeing everything new brought to the table had me pumped from the moment that I saw the announcement back at the Bandai Summer Showcase in July. Here to celebrate Pac-Man's 45th anniversary, we're finally getting Pac Man World 2 Re-Pac. The following will be a spoiler-free review. I'll discuss the new features, presentation, and overall setup, but I'll leave out footage from the later areas and surprises because yes, there are a few surprises to be seen here. I'm incredibly excited to have had the opportunity to play through this game early and provide my thoughts on it for you, but it is a review, and it's only fair that I look at this remake from a balanced standpoint so you can be sure that you're getting my true, genuine thoughts free from bias. With all of that out of the way, let's jump in. One night, while everyone in Pac Village is peacefully sleeping, 4 familiar ghosts steal the golden fruit from the tree at the town's center, accidentally releasing a dark and ancient force known as Spooky, the king of the ghosts himself. Determined to take over Pac-Land and leave it in ruin, Spooky departs with his minions and begins his plot for world domination to exact revenge on those who had him imprisoned beneath the golden tree generations beforehand. It's up to Pac-Man to chase down the ghosts, reclaim the golden fruit, and seal the sinister specter back in his prison. It's a super simple setup, but it's cute. This feels very fitting for Pac-Man. It's simple, there's a little bit of flavor to it, but it's very easy to jump into. There's not a whole lot you need to know beforehand. Kind of feels like just jumping into an episode of a Saturday morning cartoon, and I feel like that's exactly where you want something like Pac-Man to be. I mean, they do play around with it a little bit. You get like the old knights that helped steal away Spooky under the tree ages ago, but it's not demanding. It's not overextending itself, and it's not trying too hard. It's a fine setup for a platformer, especially from the era that this one came out in, and I think it does the job just fine. That being said, one of the best parts of this is that it sets you in the world and just immediately lets you sink yourself into the gameplay itself, and the gameplay is a classic style 3D platformer, back from the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox era. The foundation to this, of course, is going to be your basic movement, running around, jumping. The weight of everything is really important, and thankfully, Pac Man World 2 has a good sense of weight. It feels good to jump around. It feels like you actually have control in midair. It feels like when you move the stick around, you're moving around as quickly and as fluidly as you would expect. Of course, if you need a little boost of speed, you can use the Rev Roll. With this, you'll stand in place and charge up speed. When you release the button, you'll charge forward, rolled up in a ball, being able to attack enemies, roll over slopes, go uphill, stuff like that. I also find it's just really useful as a way to just get a sudden burst of speed. I mean, let's call it what it is. This is very similar to the Sonic Spin Dash. I do think it's smart of the game to primarily use this for ramps. It'll let you just charge up and then right off the ramp, and you kind of automatically go in the direction it's intending you to. This didn't always happen back in the original version. Sometimes it was a little bit difficult to actually line up your charge and actually go in the direction the ramp is trying to send you in. In Re-Pac, I never had a problem being able to use a ramp and just sort of end up where I was intended to, you know what I mean? Of course, Pac-Man is a big old ball and he can do more than just roll around, he can also bounce. The butt bounce is such a simple but fun little mechanic, being able to just jump into the air and then press the jump button again to launch yourself down and get a good bounce, get a little bit of height off of that. It's good for platforming, but with Re-Pac, they actually decided to go and amplify this ability just a little bit. Now we have the super butt bounce. You have this reticle that closes in around Pac-Man when you're in a jump. If you press X at just the right moment, you'll charge down at the ground with extra force. This causes a shockwave around you, stunning enemies, destroying others, and it also bounces you up higher, so again, really useful for platforming. As a matter of fact, this is something you're going to want to get good at, because it's something that the game starts to get a little bit more reliant on towards the final hours of the title, but thankfully this is a fun little feature to actually just run around and practice with. You also have the flip kick. Back in the original release, this was something that you would would do if you were jumping in the air and then pressed the attack button. Thankfully, for the remake, this has its own dedicated button. You can actually initiate a flip kick not just in air like in the original, but also on the ground. Pretty much anywhere you are, you have the ability to defend yourself and actually attack in close quarters. I think something the game does really well is setting up opportunities for you to be running around through the overworld, maybe rolling in a certain direction. Sometimes on rails sections will just put these floating item boxes around the terrain, and being able to just jump up and kick these boxes open feels very, very satisfying. This is probably one of the setups that feels the best. Anytime the game does this and just lets you go wild with the flip kick. It also just makes breaking things open around the overworld a lot quicker, snappier. It just feels really good instead of you just having to use the butt bounce to destroy everything. And you do have one final option, actually making its return from Pac Man World 1, which was not in the original Pac Man World 2. You have the Pac Dot Attack. As you run around, you're obviously going to see the classic Pac Dots littered all over the terrain of every area. As you gobble these little guys up, you'll start to see them pool in a little counter down in the bottom left corner. This essentially gives you an arsenal of the classic little pickup, and you can just hold down a button to pick one of these up and then throw it back at an enemy. The longer that you hold it, you can actually turn it into a Pac Dot bomb, which has a more explosive impact and can help break certain things. The unfortunate thing is that while it is kind of neat seeing this return from Pac Man World 1 since it wasn't in the original Pac Man World 2, it's also in a game that was not super designed to use this. And I mean, you can use it to open crates and such, but especially with the addition of the flip kick being able to be used on flat ground, it doesn't really feel like the Pac Dot Attack actually has much utility. There were one or two scenarios where I did actually find this legitimately helpful, but for the most part, I was mostly just kind of using this, finding that other moves were getting the same job done quicker and easier, and there were even times when I thought that using the Pac Dot Attack or the bomb was going to be the solution, and it just flat out doesn't work. You are expected to use other moves in the arsenal, and it just kind of feels like this was added as a nice addition, something that was in the previous game that would have felt weird having been absent, but the game isn't really formatted to make good use out of this, and I do find that a bit of a shame. Another new addition that I thought was kind of neat, but I also didn't get a whole lot of use out of, was the flutter jump. The flutter jump is good for course correcting in mid-air. You can just sort of hover up in the air for a few seconds, and it's good for just kind of avoiding an obstacle down from below you or something like that, but I find that the movement and the jumping and the gravity all feel so good that this typically wasn't all that necessary. This doesn't feel so much like a missed opportunity for a move, it's just sort of nice to have it here, but also it's also kind of nice that I didn't find this was something I needed to rely on all that much. It's more of like a correction if you're not used to a lot of 3D platforming movement and you do need that extra wiggle room to just kind of make sure that you're not putting yourself into a predicament. But for the most part, for me personally, it's not something I used often, but you know, I'm not gonna complain about it being there. I think another reason why I didn't find the flutter jump all that useful was partially because now we actually have a landing guide. You can actually see a marker below you where you're going to land. This was especially helpful in areas like in the second world where you're hopping around in the trees. You got all these trampolines and all of these different areas that you're trying to make precision jumps to, and this just made it so much easier to actually tell where I was going to end up, so I was making less platforming mistakes, and that was only amplified by how much better the camera control is now. In the original Pac Man World 2, you would find the camera would just sort of like lock into awkward places a lot of the times. I'm not somebody that usually gets hung up on, you know, bad 3D cameras, but in that original title, it did sometimes get itself into certain situations where it was hard to tell what exactly was going on, but now you have complete control over the camera at basically all times, and this makes it so much easier to deal with different situations. You can essentially adjust the camera to whatever best format is going to help you along your journey. This is what the camera is really here for, and I think that this was a great addition, and it actually does add a lot of sense of fun and control over the entire gameplay experience. This is the important framework of a game like this. The actions, the commands, the moveset. It's easy to understand, but it feels fun and engaging to control. The rest of the game's job is to present you with challenges and with obstacles to overcome using your mastery of those skills and abilities. Thankfully, the game does this well. As you go from stage to stage, you'll see new types of obstacles, new formations of terrain that take advantage of your moveset. Not every move gets the same amount of love, and I do wish that there were certain abilities that did get used more often, but the running, the jumping, the bouncing, all of that is here. It's in full force. I think it's used very well, and it's just a joy to be able to run around through different formations of terrain and different locales using this particular moveset. Of course, there are a couple of special gimmicks that are introduced to help just keep things a little bit interesting. Every once in a while, you'll see a group of ghosts. They're wandering around in this one little section of the level, and they can hurt you, but you can't hurt them unless you find this Mega Pac Dot and you turn into Mega Pac-Man. I like that they actually went for the giant round Pac-Man this time around. In the original game, it just kind of like it gave you an aura that let you glow. The ghosts would turn blue when you could eat them, but now it actually feels like it emulates a actual power-up. Now you turn bigger, there's this nice sense of weight that you're actually changing forms, and you can chase these things down and eat them. It's actually a lot of fun to be able to do this. You can also turn tiny a couple of times. There's a different sort of power pellet that you can eat, and it will make you small, and you can go into certain areas and crevices and stuff, and I think that this is used well, especially for areas that are hiding secret little rooms, places where you can get little goodies and stuff like that, and it's just sort of tucked away. Outside of that, though, this does feel like a missed opportunity. It felt like a missed opportunity in the original game, and it feels like not a whole lot more was really done with it here in the remake either. I feel like it was used a few more times here, and I do appreciate the attempt to actually get some more utility out of this ability, but sadly, it does still feel underutilized, and it's something that I would like if we do get another game in this vein, be that Pac Man World 3 Re-Pac, or maybe, I don't know, a Pac Man World 4 would be cool. I feel like there's just more you could do with this, especially if you could incorporate it into mazes that are hidden within small sections of the levels and stuff. It's a fine little idea. It's just not utilized as much or as interestingly as I feel like it otherwise could have been. Now, one power-up that I do think was used much better was this Steel Ball power-up. It will coat Pac-Man in this metal shell, and it allows him to be a lot heavier. And at first, I thought that this was really just used to make him sink down to the bottom of bodies of water, but thankfully, later on in the game, this actually did end up seeing more utility, and I think was even used more frequently, but I don't want to show off too many sections of the later parts of the game, but just know that they do continue to get use out of this, and I actually did quite like that this ended up being an ever-present part of the experience. Now, those are all power-ups that are scattered throughout various levels in all of the different worlds that you go to, but certain worlds that are collections of particular levels will have special gimmicks unique to just them, like the ice skating, roller skating, swimming. These little additions, I think, help break up the gameplay in some really fun ways. It feels like you're not just playing the same kind of level back to back all the time. Every once in a while, you'll be given a sort of set piece. It's something that I think Re-Pac does really well, is that it actually emphasizes certain abilities as it doesn't rely on them too much like the original Pac Man World 2 did with its swimming locations. Now it just feels like there's actually more to do with them. It feels like a more unique ability, and it adds to a sense that the areas that you're visiting and that the levels that you're playing through actually have more unique aspects, and it feels like you're going on a proper journey that way, I suppose, where you're actually dealing with different types of terrain in different ways, so you actually have to adapt to new circumstances and scenarios, and it just makes it feel like a more fleshed out adventure. And of course, what's an adventure like this if you aren't stopped by a few boss battles along the way? As you chase down the different ghosts that have all stolen the golden fruit, you encounter them in boss battles, one by one, as you take them down in their mechs. Now, this is an area where I think the game really shines. In the original title, you fight one ghost that's using a frog mech, and it felt kind of cool. It was like a neat little gimmick. I will say, I do miss the old wooden aesthetic of these. Now they're all made of metal, which, you know, probably makes more sense, but I do like the wood texture to the originals, and I do kind of wish that was still there. That being said, an overall just hands down improvement is the fact that since the frog boss in the original game, every other ghost just had a variation of the same sort of mech that you would fight against. Now, in Re-Pac, every single ghost has their own unique mech based on a different animal, and it feels so much better, like they're actually given the limelight in different ways and playing around with the environment that they're in, and there's some really creative ways that these particular animals are used. Not only that, I actually found these boss battles were refreshingly challenging. I don't feel like they were really too hard. There were a couple where I died once or twice, but like overall, I thought that these were really engaging. I thought that these were a ton of fun to actually sit down and play through. They all have varied and clear move sets. It's not too difficult to figure out how to take them down, but it does test your reflexes. It does make you actually think about how these obstacles are coming at you and how to avoid them and how to hit back, and I actually had a lot of fun with the bosses. These were a legitimate highlight, and it really helped that these were such a unique element to this version of the game that was elevating something that felt disappointing in the original, but went to add so much more freshness and so much more identity to each individual encounter versus the original, where it just sort of felt like after the first boss fight and up until the last one, you just sort of got different variations of the same encounter. It wasn't really satisfying. Now, it actually feels like you're having these one-on-one encounters. Now, it actually feels like there's a little bit of personality to these fights that take advantage of the environments that you're actually traveling through, and I liked this a lot. I thought it was a big improvement. I am not going to be showing the final boss here. I think I'm just going to say that it is different than the original, but I do think that this is the one encounter that might be a little too difficult. I mean, it's the final boss, it's gonna be a challenge, but I had a lot of trouble getting through that final boss fight. It took me a long time to beat, and I'm not sure if it was maybe I was tired because it was like right at the end of the game and I played through this pretty quickly, or if it really was like actually that difficult. But you know, I think just because of the way that it was formatted and there's a lack of checkpoints and everything, it did take a bit of endurance to actually get through, but that was like the only fight that I thought maybe overextended its challenge just a little bit, but I suppose that is a little fitting for a final boss encounter. But I'm gonna be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if I wasn't the only one that thought that this was maybe a little harder than it needed to be. Who knows, maybe it'll get a patch. But these boss encounters are not the only thing in the game that's been remixed. The whole game has been. It's more than just a visual upgrade. I think it's actually more like the remake of Silent Hill 2, using the original as a basis and then expanding on it from every detail, making larger and more fleshed out areas to explore in each level, giving you more to actually play around with and use your moveset on. The water levels later on in the game got a huge upgrade here. They were all very on rails and all very samey in the original game, but now they actually feel like properly crafted environments and areas that actually let you go out and explore and have more fun with more agency and playability. Honestly, this is something I was really pleased to see in this game. As somebody that sometimes gets tired of just how many remakes and remasters there are out there, it was very refreshing to get something like this that gave me the feelings and the tones and a lot of the moments and everything of the original experience, but also gave me new stuff to play, new stuff to do on a constant level. Like, it was always something new mixed in with something old. It was a great little mix of things. I do think that one weakness of this game, and it's something that's shared by the original, is you'll get these like dot chains where, you know, you hit the red dot and then you go flying through the air to gobble up all of these dots in midair. It takes you from point A to point B, but if you're going around and trying to collect a bunch of the fruit and everything that's scattered throughout each level, it gets a little annoying when, in order to get everything, it's a lot of just going back and forth through the same environments, and these dot chains are a lot of the times just kind of like formatted in a way that will send you back to the start of some place to start something over, but you kind of have to do it that way if you're actually trying to go out and collect everything. Thankfully, it's not like this is a constant problem, and you know, at the end of the day, it's still fun seeing Pac-Man float around like that, and it's not like that's all these are used for. These are actually still used for straightforward progression as well. It's just something that kind of stood out to me. Now, the new content does not stop at just expanding on previous levels. There is actually a surprising amount of just new features and content to explore throughout this game. There is a 2-player mode. A second player can jump in using a little Pac drone that can shoot things and absorb collectibles. Unfortunately, I didn't get to experience this for myself. I kind of blitzed through this game and didn't have anybody with me to actually get to sit down and try this out with, but it does seem like it's fun, especially for anybody with younger siblings or anybody out there where people get to experience the game together a little bit. I think one of my favorite ways that this game was expanded upon, though, was how the Pac Village was handled. This is now your hub area. In the original game, you just sort of went from level to level to level to level, and as soon as you beat the boss of one area, it was just on to the next level, which would take you to the next area. Now, you're actually stopping in at the Pac Village from time to time as you beat bosses and as you return here with the golden fruit, and you get to see life return to the village as the roots of the demonic ghost tree wormwood start to recede. I think that the way that the Pac Village hub was handled, having all of these different elements that you can play around with, especially with the arcade room, adds a new context to collecting, and it's been updated and vastly improved. There's a bunch of different fruits scattered throughout each level for you to collect, and in the original, it was all just sort of like getting a check mark for you at the end. There wasn't a whole lot of in-game incentive really pushing you towards getting all of that unless you just really wanted 100%. Now, collecting fruit gives you in-level rewards like gashapons that you can find in special chests. If you collect all of one type of fruit, you'll run across a chest with that fruit on it, and you can open it up and get something out of it. The most common reward in these chests is going to be these little gashapons that you can open up, and you get a little figurine for the Pac Village that you can put up on these pedestals and help decorate the town around you. It's a fun little way of putting your stamp on the place you live in. Some of these fruit chests will also reward you with a Galaxian that will grant you access to a new maze that you can play in the arcade. In the original game, you would be stopped dead in your tracks if you picked up a Galaxian and go right into the maze. Now it's not quite so abrupt. You actually get to just keep playing the level, and because you keep going back to the Pac Village so often, it doesn't really feel like it's interrupting your game flow. You can just go back to the arcade anytime you feel like and play through the mazes that you've unlocked. This will help you unlock new gashapon machines that you can use the coins that you collect in each level to get new statues through those. There's time trials where you can blitz through each stage, getting faster times to compare clear times with other platform-specific leaderboards. There's a mission board that will let you accomplish specific tasks throughout each stage, like defeating every enemy, collecting every piece of fruit, and landing a rank in the time trials. If you manage to clear all of these objectives, you're rewarded with a new costume for Pac-Man to wear. All of these rewards, all of these benefits, these are all things that you can view, take advantage of, and see in the Pac Village itself. You get to see life come back to the village throughout the entire journey. It just kind of feels like this place is a physical manifestation of your progression through the game. And it just like, you know, it's nice to have a little bit of hominess here. I like having this hub that's actually ever present and not just something that you see at the beginning of the game and might not see again until the end. There are some features, kind of like the 2-player mode, that I unfortunately didn't really get to see much use out of, partially because it's just not for players like me, something like the fairy mode. This is for younger players that maybe aren't ready for the challenge that the standard levels have to offer. But it helps make the adventure easier and more casual, adding more platforms, blocking out the ability to take damage, things like that. If you get like a real young sibling, or you're just giving this to some kids who maybe this is their first 3D platformer, this is probably a good way to ease them into the experience without overwhelming them. I do like that this is here. And of course, finally, we come to presentation. Obviously, in a remake, one of the front and center elements that's always going to be noticed and discussed is the changes to presentation. Personally, I love the way this game looks. The character models are spot on and capture the unique look of the Pac-Man franchise very well. I mean, just look at the way the ghosts look. I feel like this is just perfect for the aesthetic of this franchise. The colors all pop, and the game is really able to capture different vibes and atmospheres to great effect. There's going to be some differences here over what you find from the original, but it still feels like it pays great service to the intent and does a great job of capturing what made this game so inviting and fun to be in. The updated soundtrack sounds phenomenal, and it was a joy to listen to the entire time through. To this day, Pac Man World 2 has one of my favorite soundtracks to a 3D platformer. Maybe a bit repetitive, there is a lot of the same leitmotif kind of used throughout the entire experience, but it's also a great leitmotif, and I love hearing it, so you know, you're not going to hear any complaints from me about that one. One thing that took me a little time to get used to hearing was Pac-Man himself. himself. Martin T. Sherman has returned in the role after voicing the character in Pac Man World 3 back in 2005, and honestly, this decision does make sense to me. I do find it a little funny, if only because the original PS1 version of Pac Man World had voice acting, which was removed for the first Re-Pac, but for World 2, they decided to just double down, bring Martin back and let the leading man talk, since so much of the game has voice acting anyways, so maybe it makes sense that the Rev-rolling hero should be able to chime in as well.
Oh, excuse me. Can't go adventuring hungry. How about a quick snack?
Now, I did not grow up with the third Pac Man World game, so this was pretty foreign to me, but now having played this remake, I totally understand why so many fans have been asking to get Martin back in this recording booth. He offers a performance that echoes the qualities of the main adventure. It's just cozy and down to earth. Pac-Man lacks a lot of the edgy attitude a lot of his counterparts in the mascot platforming space have, but what we get here is just a very simple guy. He displays a sense of familiarity with the main ghosts and even tries to talk them down before a fight starts, showing that at his core, he's just a dude looking for a peaceful life for everyone, and what's not to love about that? It's not a mind-blowing performance or anything, and unfortunately, I think he's let down by the writing of the cutscenes from time to time. A lot of the dialogue is pretty generic, with tropey phrases that sometimes even land awkwardly, but the man has some charm to him, and I came to find that his voice is fitting for one of the most iconic characters in media history. Sadly, the dialogue isn't the only thing letting down the presentation, as I think the animation is lacking some spice in key moments as well. It's the little things, you know? I'm not gonna lie, when the title screen showed up, I was really sad to see that Pac-Man doesn't play around with the logo the way he did in the original. There's moments in the scenes surrounding boss fights that feel like they're just trying to break free into more dynamic camera angles or movement, and while I think the models all look fantastic, I wish they got to move around a bit more expressively when the characters are locked in chatter with each other. Thankfully, that seems to be my biggest hang-up with presentation, and it's something that feels overall pretty easy to forgive when the game is this fun, and while things feel a bit stiff and cinematic, when you're out on the field and hopping around in your collectathon, Pac-Man is as bouncy and lively as you could ever hope for him to be, and the infectious joy and whimsy I get from playing this game from over 20 years ago is still very much alive today. The best part is, it's all done in service of something that still feels like a new experience. This isn't just repackaging your nostalgia and selling it back to you. Pac Man World 2 Re-Pac could have settled for a much more simplistic remaster and called it a day, but what we have here is the result of an incredibly talented team of people that clearly loved this character, loved this adventure, and wanted to see just how much they could flesh out the experience. It's a balanced tightrope challenge of offering a preserved sense of the original experience while also being a new game in its own right with its own challenges, moments, ideas, and creativity. And to think, we even still have more on the horizon with the upcoming Sonic collaboration stage, and the rewards and incentives this game offers turns us into a game I really want to go back into and chase after that 100% completion mark. I give Pac Man World 2 Re-Pac a huge recommendation. There's always going to be a place for the simple, polished, and memorable 3D platformers like this, and every time we get an experience this joyous, it reminds me of why I fell in love with video games from a young age. Even if you're a veteran of the original release, there's plenty to see here, discover, and challenge yourself with, and if you've never touched any version of this game before, you're in for a great time. The game is available starting September 26, 2025 on Switch, Switch 2, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series systems, and of course, PC. A huge thanks to Bandai Namco for providing the review copy that I used to play through this game, and a big thanks to everyone for tuning in, and I hope that you'll go out there and have some fun in Pac Man World 2 Re-Pac. I appreciate everybody watching. I do want to clarify for any of my supporters over on Patreon. First, thank you so much for all of your support, but also when it comes to videos like this, you know, there's a limited amount of time between when I get the review code versus when the embargo lifts, and I just want to be timely. With videos like this, unfortunately, the 2-day early access is not something that I can quite manage, just due to the time constraints, and I hope you understand, but any of my top tier patrons still get a version of this video with absolutely no ads uploaded over on Patreon. And of course, with that said, I do want to give a special shout out not only to all of my wonderful Patreon supporters, but especially to my current top tier patrons. This month they are, and Mr. SP, Brendan Hesse, Dresselite, Earl Valco, Jacob Stadler, Jazzy Jefferson, Mackenzel, Milton Manthing, Mitch Pym, Old New Type, Patricia Marcoux, Peter O'Hagan, Cinderin7, Snapkick, Cyrus the Skeptic, and Thomas Brooks. Thank you, each and every one of you, from $1 to $10 a month, doesn't matter. You guys make this possible, and you make it worth it. See you next mission.